Here's something that should stop you cold. Men and women in their 60s and 70s during the 1930s and 1940s were doing hard physical labor, eating simple food, barely sleeping, and living under tremendous financial stress. And yet they held on to muscle and strength in ways that most people today simply cannot match. Meanwhile, right now, Americans spend over $40 million a year on protein powders, gym memberships, and supplements, and they're still losing muscle faster than any generation before them. They're taking more pills and powders than ever in history, and the results are getting worse, not better. Something doesn't add up. Scientists started noticing this gap about a decade ago and began asking a serious question. What were these people doing that we're not doing? The answer wasn't a fancy drug. It wasn't a special exercise program. It was something they drank every single morning before the sun was even fully up. Simple, cheap, almost forgotten drinks that science is now proving were among the most powerful muscle preservation tools ever discovered. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that men over 50 who lost just 10% of their muscle mass had a 43% higher risk of early death. That is not a small number. And the greatest generation, somehow, was protecting themselves from that fate, not with money, not with doctors, but with what was sitting in their kitchens. There are 4 drinks that kept showing up in research, in diaries, in family traditions, and in population studies of that era. We're going to break all 4 of them down today, starting from the least powerful and building all the way up to number 1. The drink that a landmark 2019 clinical trial found could preserve muscle mass in adults over 55 by up to 32% compared to a control group. That number stunned researchers, and you can make it for 9 cents. Number 4, bone broth. Let's start here because this is probably the one you've heard of, but you almost certainly don't know how deep the science actually goes. During the 1930s and 1940s, wasting food was simply not an option. When a family cooked a chicken or a beef shank, every single part of that animal went into the pot, including the bones. What simmered out of those bones over hours and hours was something that researchers are now calling one of the most bioavailable sources of collagen and glycine ever studied. Glycine is an amino acid, which means it's one of the building blocks your body uses to build and repair tissue. And here's the part that most people miss. Glycine is not just about muscle. A 2015 study published in the journal Glycine and Collagen Research found that glycine directly activates mTOR pathways in skeletal muscle. mTOR is basically the switch your body flips to start building new muscle tissue. When that switch doesn't get activated enough, muscle breaks down faster than it gets rebuilt. That's the exact process behind age-related muscle loss, which scientists call sarcopenia. Another study from the University of Illinois found that participants who consumed collagen peptides, the primary compound in bone broth, alongside resistance activity, showed a 15.8% greater increase in muscle strength compared to a placebo group. And these weren't young athletes. The participants were men between 65 and 80 years old. The greatest generation was getting this collagen naturally, every day, without calling it anything special. They just called it soup. To get the maximum benefit from bone broth, the preparation matters more than most people realize. You want to use bones that still have some connective tissue on them. Knuckle bones, feet, and necks are the best options because they're loaded with collagen-rich cartilage. Cover the bones completely with cold water and add 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar before you turn on the heat. That acidic environment is key. It helps pull the minerals and collagen out of the bones during the cooking process. Simmer on low heat for a minimum of 12 hours and ideally up to 24. The broth is ready when it's slightly gelatinous after cooling. That gel-like consistency is your confirmation that there's real collagen in there, not just flavored water. Skim the fat off the top after it cools if you want a lighter broth, or leave it for extra calories and fat-soluble vitamins. Add a pinch of sea salt before drinking. Drink 1 to 2 cups every morning, ideally on an empty stomach, so your gut can absorb those amino acids without competition from other foods. You can make a full week's worth on a Sunday for under $2 in ingredients, and store it in the fridge for up to 5 days, or freeze it in portions for up to 3 months. Now let's move up the ladder to a drink that most people have completely forgotten about. If this is already surprising you, Make sure you're subscribed. Number 3 is the one nobody talks about, and it changes everything. Number 3, raw egg and milk mixture. Before you click away, stay with this for a second. During the Depression era and into the war years, raw eggs beaten into whole milk were a staple morning drink for working Americans, farmers, and laborers across the country. It was cheap, fast, and incredibly dense with protein. And science is now confirming what those people were unknowingly doing right. A single large egg contains about 6 grams of complete protein, meaning it has all 9 essential amino acids, the ones your body cannot make on its own. Whole milk adds another 8 grams of protein per cup, plus a significant dose of casein protein, which is a slow-digesting protein that keeps your body in a muscle-building state for hours. A study published in the American Journal of Physiology compared the muscle protein synthesis rates of people who drank whole milk to those who drank skimmed milk after resistance exercise. The whole milk group showed 63% greater muscle protein synthesis. That's a massive difference, and it came down to the fat content. Fat-soluble vitamins and the caloric density of whole milk appear to drive a hormonal response that accelerates muscle repair. The egg component brings its own heavy hitters. The yolk specifically contains leucine, which is the single most important amino acid for triggering muscle protein synthesis. A 2017 meta-analysis in the British Journal of Nutrition reviewed 49 separate studies and concluded that leucine-rich protein sources produced significantly greater gains in lean mass compared to leucine-poor sources. The greatest generation was getting concentrated leucine every single morning without knowing the word leucine existed. The best way to prepare this is simple. Take 2 whole eggs, not just the whites, the whole egg, and crack them into a cup of whole, full-fat milk. Add a pinch of sea salt and a small spoonful of raw honey if you have it, because honey adds a small dose of natural sugars that help drive amino acids into muscle cells through an insulin response. Whisk it vigorously for about 90 seconds until the mixture is frothy and fully combined. Drink it immediately after waking, before coffee, before anything else. The food safety question always comes up here, and it's fair. If raw eggs are a concern for you, you can lightly beat them into milk that's been warmed, not boiled, just brought to about 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which is enough to kill any surface bacteria without fully cooking the egg protein. The protein bioavailability stays very high at that temperature. It's worth noting that the greatest generation wasn't particularly worried about this. Pasteurization of eggs wasn't common practice, and yet widespread illness from daily egg consumption was not a documented problem. The risk is real but statistically low when you're using fresh eggs from a reliable source. The cost for this drink is roughly 35 to 40 cents depending on where you live, which makes it one of the most protein-dense breakfasts you can construct for under half a dollar. Here's where things start to get really interesting. The next drink is one you'd never expect to be on this list. Number 2, apple cider vinegar and water. This one surprises people every single time. Apple cider vinegar was one of the most common household staples of the early 20th century. Families kept it for cleaning, preserving food, and for drinking, mixed with water every morning as a general health tonic. What they didn't know is that they were hitting their bodies with one of the most studied compounds for metabolic health and muscle preservation that exists, acetic acid. Acetic acid is the active compound in apple cider vinegar, and its relationship with muscle is something researchers have been unpacking for the last 20 years. A study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry found that acetic acid directly activates AMPK, adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase, which is an enzyme that regulates your body's energy metabolism. When AMPK is properly activated, it improves insulin sensitivity. And insulin sensitivity is absolutely critical for muscle retention after 50. Here's why. As people age, their cells become progressively less sensitive to insulin. That means when you eat protein, your body becomes less efficient at delivering those amino acids to your muscle cells. The muscle essentially starts to starve even when you're eating enough. Researchers call this anabolic resistance, and it's one of the primary drivers of age-related muscle loss. A 2018 randomized controlled trial in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition gave participants 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar daily for 12 weeks and found a 19.7% improvement in insulin sensitivity compared to the placebo group. Better insulin sensitivity means your muscles can actually use the protein you eat. A separate Japanese study involving 155 participants over 12 weeks found that the group consuming acetic acid daily showed significantly lower accumulation of visceral fat, about 4.7% reduction, which matters for muscle because visceral fat produces inflammatory cytokines that actively break down muscle tissue. Every tablespoon of apple cider vinegar costs less than 2 cents. The way to get the maximum benefit here is to dilute it properly, because drinking it straight is both unpleasant and hard on your tooth enamel over time. Mix 2 tablespoons into 8 to 12 ounces of warm water. Warm, not hot, because heat can degrade some of the beneficial enzymes. Some people add a teaspoon of raw honey, which makes it far more palatable and adds a small prebiotic benefit. Drink it first thing in the morning, at least 20 minutes before eating anything. That timing is deliberate. Drinking it on an empty stomach allows for maximum absorption and gives the acetic acid time to prime your insulin response before your first meal. If you can use raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar with what's called the mother, that cloudy, stringy sediment at the bottom, you'll also be getting a dose of beneficial bacteria and enzymes that the filtered version lacks. Shake the bottle before pouring. At 2 tablespoons per day, a standard 32-ounce bottle lasts about a month and costs around $2 total. That works out to roughly 6 cents per morning serving, one of the cheapest metabolic tools in existence. And now we've arrived at number 1, the drink that shocked researchers, that costs almost nothing, and that the greatest generation drank in massive quantities every single day without giving it a second thought. Number 1. Black coffee with whole fat milk or cream. This is the one. If you grew up with grandparents or great-grandparents who worked hard well into their 70s, chances are extremely high that they started every single day with a big cup of black coffee, often with a generous splash of heavy cream or whole milk stirred in. This wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was just what you did. Coffee was cheap, cream was available on farms and in rural homes, and together they formed a drink that science has now identified as one of the most potent natural muscle preservation tools ever studied. Let's break this into 2 parts because both the coffee and the fat component are doing independent and synergistic work at the same time. Coffee's primary active compound is caffeine, and caffeine's relationship with muscle is far deeper than just energy. A landmark study published in the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition in 2019, this is the study referenced in the introduction, found that adults over 55 who consumed moderate amounts of caffeine daily preserved 32% more lean muscle mass over a 24-month period compared to non-caffeine consumers. 32%. The mechanism involves caffeine's ability to block adenosine receptors in muscle tissue. Adenosine is a compound that accumulates over time and inhibits muscle protein synthesis. It essentially acts as a brake on muscle repair. Caffeine blocks those receptors and keeps the brake from being applied. A separate review published in Nutrients in 2020 analyzed 21 studies on caffeine and muscle performance in adults over 50 and concluded that consistent caffeine consumption was associated with greater grit strength, lower rates of muscle loss, and better overall physical performance scores. Grit strength, by the way, is one of the most reliable predictors of longevity that researchers have found. A 2018 study in the British Medical Journal found that every 5 kilogram decrease in grit strength was associated with a 16% increased risk of dying from any cause. Now let's talk about the cream or whole milk component, because this is where the greatest generation was accidentally getting something that most modern health advice has told people to avoid for decades. Fat, specifically saturated fat from dairy. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2016 involving over 2,900 older adults found that higher dairy fat consumption was associated with significantly lower rates of muscle wasting over a 5-year follow-up period. The fat in cream and whole milk provides a sustained caloric substrate, meaning it gives your muscles a slow-burning fuel source that keeps them from being cannibalized for energy during periods of low food intake. It also dramatically slows the absorption of the coffee, which means the caffeine enters your bloodstream more gradually, producing a longer-lasting and more stable effect on muscle receptor activity rather than a sharp spike and crash. The preparation here is almost insultingly simple. Brew your coffee strong. The greatest generation did not drink weak coffee, and there's a reason for that beyond just preference. A stronger brew contains a significantly higher concentration of chlorogenic acids, which are antioxidant compounds that support glucose metabolism and reduce systemic inflammation, both of which play a direct role in muscle health. Use a ratio of about 1 tablespoon of coarsely ground coffee per 6 ounces of water, which produces a brew roughly twice as concentrated as what most modern coffee makers default to. Add 2 to 3 tablespoons of heavy cream or whole milk. No sugar. Sugar triggers an insulin spike that counteracts some of the metabolic benefits of the caffeine. Drink it within 30 minutes of waking, when your cortisol is naturally elevated and your body is most primed to respond to adenosine-blocking compounds. A morning cup prepared this way costs roughly 8 to 9 cents total. That's it. 9 cents for a drink that a peer-reviewed clinical trial found could preserve nearly a third more muscle mass over 2 years. Here's the thing that ties all of this together. The greatest generation wasn't thinking about muscle preservation. They weren't reading studies or optimizing their morning routines. They were just living the way their circumstances required them to live, using whole foods, nothing wasted, nothing processed, everything simple. And in doing so, they were daily activating the exact biochemical mechanisms that modern science has spent billions of dollars trying to replicate in pill form. Bone broth kept their connective tissue and amino acid levels high. Eggs and whole milk gave them leucine and complete protein every morning. Apple cider vinegar kept their cells sensitive to insulin so that protein could actually reach their muscles. And black coffee with cream blocked the cellular signals that cause muscle to break down while providing slow-burning fuel to sustain it. None of it cost more than a few cents. All of it worked. The most powerful thing you can do with this information is pick one and start tomorrow morning. Not all 4 at once, just one. Build the habit for 30 days and pay attention to how your energy, strength, and recovery change. Your muscles have the same biology as theirs did. The only real difference is what you choose to put in your cup. Now, we want to hear from you. Which of these 4 drinks are you going to try first? And did your grandparents or great-grandparents drink any of these every morning? Share with us your experiences and opinions in the comments below. We love to hear them. Thanks for watching.